Welcome to the Interstice podcast, episode 57. I really like that. I just like the number 7, so this excites me. First things first, I wanted to say that if anybody wants to be a guest on the show, to please do contact me at contact@davetrippinjapan.com. And we could talk about you being a guest. That would be awesome. As well, you have that contact information if you want to write me a question, whether that's to do with anything in Japan, or living in Japan, or teaching in Japan, or whatever it might be. Or maybe you just want to wax poetic for a little while in an email. That's cool, too. That's good. Yeah. Oh, there's 2 shout-outs at the beginning. I wanted to do was... one, always for the people who support me on Patreon. That's huge. Smaller channel like I run is perhaps more reliant than even the larger ones, because then people can distribute how much support they have, where everybody really matters on my Patreon, because everything is so small, which is cool and humble. The next shout out I wanted to give was for, you won't be able to see it obviously unless you're watching this on the YouTube channel, but this is very exciting. I've had a supporter for a number of years. His name's Victor, and I love sound. Music is a huge part of my life, and he has kept me in the best sound that you could possibly imagine. Just sent over the MX5s from Sony, and these things are just like, forget about sound. Let's just talk about how like buttery smooth they are in your head. They're like, they're incredible. The noise canceling is amazing. And one of the things I noticed, and I watched a few reviews for these, which people did not pick up on, but I'm like, oh, this was well worth saying. I'm surprised, like MKHB or whatever, and Linus, they never mentioned this thing. So maybe it's because I've used the MX4s very, very recently that I was aware of this, where one of the things that you can do with these like higher tier headphones is there's a lot of there's basically touch commands that you can do, and you can move the track forward, you can pause the track, start the track, so on and so forth, just by these gestures that you do on the right ear. And while they were totally fine within the MX4, I've noticed right away that the MX5 it's more responsive and more accurate. So I think that there's some tweak that they've done there that's made them that much better, which is really, really, really cool. So thank you very much, Victor. I really, really appreciate it. We were talking about a bit of a review. Even in only a day, I've noticed that while the others were comfortable, these are even more comfortable on your ears. Where the others had like good responsiveness in terms of the commands that you could do to them, this has an even better responsiveness to the commands that you can give it, which is awesome. And just because, generosity should continue to spread when somebody has done something kind for someone else, because it was absurd to me, I was like, there's no way that I should have MX4s and MX5s. I've got a really dear friend. He's involved with some of the things I'll discuss today. His name's Mihao, great friend since I've moved here to Kyoto. And he loves music much as I do, and so I gifted him the MX4s, because now I have the MX5s because of you, Victor, and so he's incredibly appreciative of that. So am I, and this was just like a really cool thing. I mean, man, they are amazing. One thing I'll say, though, this is like one more review detail that I'll give for anybody who's considering if they want to get these style of headphones. I actually had to repair the MX4s at one point because of water damage, and this was not as though I'd been careless with water. I had just been around it a bit. For example, there might be a little drizzle and I'd wear them outside. I would go to the gym and I would sweat heavily in them, and the water damage destroyed the electronics. I had to send it in and get it repaired. And they're fine now, but I am hyper conscientious of having these things anywhere near a drop of water. And then when you actually open the MX5s, they now have a little slip that shows like what you should not do with water, and it's handle them after you've cleaned dishes. They got like a big X. Wear them while sweating. They got a big X. And then, of course, out in the rain. That did not come with the MX4. So I think they've had so many. This is sort of like the silent problem that they have, where I think people usually expect a little bit more resiliency in water, but this is a downside that they have. But they are more like these are beautiful travel headphones or commute headphones that you need to be a little bit precious with them, actually. So one more other thing to consider there. There's construction. There's a building going down near my apartment, so please do excuse me if there is a little extra sound today, because it's like a stone's throw away that's happening. I'm actually really happy in terms of how loud it's been, because I was like, okay, here we go. Like, you just got to endure this. It's going to be all this construction going up next to your house, and that's going to mean a lot of noise. Well, you're trying to edit and work here and do everything. Good time to have noise-canceling headphones. But then it was not actually that bad, so I'm pretty stoked about that. Construction can, like, ruin your sleep for months if it's, not done well. So, moving on to, like, cool things that are going on to talk about. There were some new experiences recently, things I had never done before in Japan, which was really, really cool. It's always, I've been here for whatever it is, 9 years now or something, and it's then quite important to me that I don't let things become stale, because I've talked about this before on the podcast, that there is absolutely a whole line of existence here for people who come to live in Japan, and they experience a honeymoon period, and then following that honeymoon period, they grow embittered and not a little bit, possibly even a lot jaded. And that's a shame, because I think that's usually that the well runs dry in terms of experience, and they feel like now they're just in this loop as opposed to experiencing something new. And rather than see that they just need to stretch the legs a bit more and go on to explore, or make that much more of an effort to explore, they kind of discount the country and their experience here as over and done with. But it's natural that you would have to make more effort to keep it interesting, right? It's harder to leave that indelible mark on you now that you've been here for a while. But it's consistent with everything else in our lives that if you get into something that you need to practice that much more. For example, if you looked at even training in the gym, the way it's diminishing returns. You're going to get all these sort of rookie gains when you go in, and you're going to look like you get this massive improvement over this first 3 months or whatever. But then the rate at which you can keep improving cannot stay at that same rate. As you get to higher and higher weights, there are limits to the human frame. And so you gotta keep working harder and harder. And very much, I think, just having a good time in Japan is like that. You gotta flex, you gotta work hard, you gotta look for those new experiences. And so I'm really, really lucky just to have a really cool connection where I'm interested to work on video projects, and I can make those, but also it certainly doesn't hurt when they fall in my lap and somebody else has organized something that I could go and do. And that was the variety that I got to enjoy recently, where Mihao, who I mentioned before, that has now inherited the MX4s, he had an early contact of a guy in the Japanese Wakeboard Association, wakeboarding, wake surfing, that kind of stuff, and introduced him to Drew. Drew is the, what would you say? He doesn't say CEO, he's got some other way he likes to say it, but just basically big boss at Garden Lab where I work. Drew is introduced to him, and then we've worked it out that come August, we're going to be covering, on a scale which we have not done before, this huge wakeboard competition event tournament in Kyushu, so south of Japan. Very, very exciting. But one of the things that we wanted to do to make sure that we're prepared, because, well, we are confident we're also doing something we've never done before, it was to get a little bit of practice in filming this kind of content specifically, because every type of filming is different, whether it's documentary or action, whatever it might be. And so to do that, there was a more minor tournament that was taking place in Hiroshima. And Hiroshima is a really fascinating place to me for obvious reasons to do with the nuclear bomb and the history that's happened there. And we were to go there. This is about 2 weeks ago. And we were going to film this more minor event, and we were going to do it over the weekend. And I'd never been to Hiroshima. And I went down there with Mihao. Mihao is actually the pilot for Garden Lab as well. And we had an awesome experience. So I got into the boat and was filming from behind the boat. Recently, for equipment, Mihaw's gotten the Mavic 3, so we got like the baller drone that's getting us wicked footage. And we got out there and had some fantastic results. I'm trying to lay the tracks here for guiding people who are interested enough in the stuff that I do, and now by extension that Studio Garden Lab does, which will be released on our Studio Garden Lab channel. We want to build up content so that when you guys go there, it's not just one thing and then you're immediately waiting for the next. So actually, we're completing several projects that are going to be scheduled, and then kind of like they do on Disney Plus or maybe sometimes on Netflix now, where they'll actually be completed and scheduled. So we'll have a month of content that when I can direct you there, you can go and see these projects, and predictably they'll be going up. And one of them is going to be the end edit that we made from going to Hiroshima. It's finished. We're sending that off to the JWBA or whatever for kind of review and just to show them our chops and what it is that we can get up to. But that will also appear on Studio Garden Lab along with other projects that we're doing that will be scheduled, which is very, very, very exciting for me. Now, what else would I say in inclusion to this? So, there's obviously the filming that we did when we were there, and it was crazy. I've never firsthand seen people wakeboarding like that before. I've wakeboarded a lot, actually. I'm not that good, but I can. It's sort of like my snowboarding. I can totally do it, and I can do it better than an absolute novice. But I'm not some crazy elite athlete in any way. Great fun. What we got to do additionally, which was not at first planned, we just thought we would go there and we would experience the wakeboarding, was Junsan. Junsan's our business contact, who we're doing the video with and for. He took us to the Hiroshima War Memorial Museum, and I did not, when I first thought of going there, put two and two together that it would be so solely focused, or a large portion of it would be, on the nuclear bomb. But of course it is. This is Hiroshima. It has the Genbaku Dome, which is the if you've heard any of the history, maybe you haven't, maybe you have, but when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the bomb was detonated actually above the ground. There was all sorts of tactical decisions that were made in terms of how they wanted to test the bomb's, how would you say result? Would you say reaction? Basically, how the bomb would work given where you detonated it. Basically, if you detonated it as it hits the ground, is it best if you detonate it above ground as they did? I mean, this is a sort of horrifying best, because it's usually measured in terms of loss of human life and damage caused. But that's what they did. And it was detonated above ground, I believe, to maximize the damage that it would cost. And it was done so above this Genbaku Dome that had this metal ceiling, and the metal melted through on the ceiling. And the structure, a large portion of it is actually not totally knocked down, perhaps because it was directly above it, but the top of it was melted off, and it's become sort of iconically a war memorial or peace memorial building afterwards. So that's in Hiroshima. And when we went through the museum, a part of doing this is that before you enter in, there is a sign that says, "Please do not speak," as you proceed through. And it really makes sense. It really, really makes sense. That was very, very, very difficult and challenging. The imagery is severe. It's brutal. It's the reality of the choice to drop that bomb on a civilian population, which is, to use that word again, horrifying. I'm not here to debate whether or not that is simply horrifying. And it was really useful, because you think that, I mean, obviously I'm very anti-nuclear war. I would love if we would not blow the planet up. That's something I'm very fond of this planet. I'm very fond of many people on it, and so if we could avoid that, that would be smashing. That would be great. But even thinking that, even aware of that as I am, that I know I studied history, I understand what happened at that time. My degree is in fact in history. But when you see it more firsthand, when you go through the memorial, when you don't speak, and you reflect on what occurred in the place that it happened, this is a totally different thing, right? You're definitely in a different mind state to be so near the epicenter of literally where the thing went off. And as I say, it was like really, really, really difficult and challenging. And I mean, I will cut myself off from talking about too much here, because it's just it'll break me. It almost broke me when I was in there. But so important that we remember. I think that's the most important thing that I take away from it, because going into the grisly details is not necessary to make that point for what you see when you go through. But so valuable to be like, oh, I thought I knew how utterly committed I was to this path of thinking, and this sort of concern that I have that we be conscientious of the fact that this must never happen again was really, really useful. Comes at a heavy cost, though. The other thing that I would say I found really, really interesting about being in there was, or when I say in there, sorry, I mean to say Hiroshima in general, was actually so first off, it was exactly as I had imagined it. I had imagined before I had arrived the color of green in the trees, the color of the stone of the buildings, and a general vibe to the whole city. And all of them were accurate. It was really, really interesting. I don't so usually imagine a place and then go there and it is as my imagination had provided me an image of. The stone was this lighter white color. I don't know why. I just imagined that, and there it was. It being a little bit more south, it has a little sprinkling more of tropicalness, and that was totally there too. The trees did that. There were still trees, but there was this extra level of fernery, ferns and stuff like that around that really added to that tropical way in which I thought I might view it, and it was all accurate, very interesting. And it was cool to hear Jun-san was telling us about the kind of the vibe in the city of the people there, because I felt there was a distinctive sort of mellowness. And the mellowness comes from, as far as Jun-san described it, is that these people have suffered so much, this city has suffered so much, that they are past vengeance. The suffering was so intense that you see that it is no longer worth getting back at someone in that way. It was so bad that you would never, for any reason of justice, want to inflict this in reciprocation. And Jun-san described it in the way that people held no grudge against America that lived there. He notably was aware that when people talked about America or foreign countries, that they were actually like very peacefully minded and welcoming. And he said that actually in other places in Japan, he noticed that people would not be so without prejudice, that this, like the nuclear bombing, could be a reason that somebody had held on, fair enough, to hatred and anger. But it did make sense to me, this concept of that there's a point where you can be hurt and feel like you should get back at someone, but then when the hurt is so acute, that's the word that I wanted to use. It is so acute that you realize reciprocating this wouldn't heal anything. Vengeance is a road to nowhere kind of thing. I'm trying to think. There was some parallel to do with this sort of like in the face of such suffering, deciding, okay, that's enough. I would never inflict it again. Oh, I remember now. It's I think that just talking about like books that do this really well, or popular TV series until the final season, would be Game of Thrones, where one of the best things, or it's almost a trope of R.R. Martin in the way that he creates narratives, is to completely morally flip our perception of a character. And it has to do with justice and punishment, where you would have somebody like Cersei, the queen, and she is this evil, rank bitch. Australia, she'd be a cunt. And you want her to have a comeuppance for being such a rampant bitch. And the thing is, you build up all that hate and frustration, but then the time comes where she is eventually held accountable for what she's done, but in such an intensely egregious way that you start to feel like this is enough. I don't know if this is justice anymore. I think this person is paid beyond what they should for what they've done, no matter who they are. And it really makes you, when you have that feeling, examine your justice boner and consider what really is justice and what really is just a desire to inflict pain on someone. And so, yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff there, completely separate of the experience that we were having for the wakeboarding. I'll tell you what, it was very, very heavy. We also, one of the things that you can do there, now taking a total 180, let's just go in a different direction, that's what a podcast is for, talking about the sort of distinctive cuisine that you find in Japan, wherever it is that you're going to live. And in Hiroshima, they have a distinct okonomiyaki. So if you've never heard of okonomiyaki, it's a Japanese savory pancake. That's the best way to put it. And when I first came to Japan, I saw this okonomiyaki in like one of the first food courts I was in, and I was like, oh, they have pancakes. I'll just get that. It was like early in the morning, and then it came out with like mayonnaise on it. And I was like, what is happening? But then discovered that's what this is. Now, the way in which they are distinct when you are getting them in, say, Tokyo, for example, is that they have a lot of ingredients usually. It's got cabbage, it's got bean sprouts, it's got pork or chicken or something else. They're usually, all those ingredients are mixed together with the dough, and it's this kind of mega pancake, everything mixed in. The way in which they do it in Hiroshima, which I quite like, is that they add more vegetables, and opposed to mixing all the things together, they are layered in the pancake. And I feel like this it's like a better way for you to be conscious of what all the flavors are that you're enjoying when you have this. And it was exceptionally good. We went out for that. Jun-san was a total bro, hooked us up with a ton of lovely draft beer, a bunch of okonomiyaki, tons of seafood. It was really, really, really good. Had a wonderful dinner, socially having a great time with each other, getting to know everybody there, talking about how the day had gone, reviewing some of the footage. That was awesome. I couldn't review mine, but Mihao moved it all over to his iPad, and we were reviewing a bunch of the drone footage that he had taken, and it was sick. It was just awesome. So that was great. We've come back. We've made the video. The video will release on Studio Garden Lab. As I continue through the weeks now, I will update as of when exactly we can expect to see that content go onto the channel, and then you could go over and check it out, because it's going to be great. There's nothing going on there that isn't going to be really, really high quality, and will demonstrate or show off all the different projects that we're involved with, which is really, really exciting. Something I should add, these are the tangents that I can go on here. About travel. So I wrote it down here in my notes. I call this the Odyssey. So I haven't been able to go back to Canada for 5 years. And that was all sparked off with, I took 1 year to not go back because I'd been here for 5 and I had never gone back to, or 4, whatever it was, and I'd always gone back every single year. And I thought, maybe just to be a little fiscally responsible, this year I won't. So many years ago I made that decision. Then the next year I got knifed in the back from my employer, and while they told me they were going to hire me, they didn't. at the last moment and were like, oh, actually, we're not going to hire you. You're fired. And I was like, whoa, everybody was shocked. It was crazy. And so suddenly I was like, I won't be able to renew my work visa. I have to do something about this. And so I was delayed in that way. And then COVID happened. And then it was one thing after another. And so I found myself at 5 years. Then my friend was going to get married. He's going to get married in Scotland, and everything was sort of clearing up. I was finding that moment of peace. And then more explosions, more garbage. Basically, I went to register for a flight, and I booked with one of these third-party companies as opposed to directly with the airline, and it led to them trying to extort me, basically. They were, at a suspicious rate, canceling or giving me notifications that, oh, a flight has changed, but we can fix it for $1,000. Oh, another flight has been canceled, but we can fix it and get you another flight for $1,000. And to do this trip that I was going to do this summer was going to be to Scotland for the wedding and then home to Canada. It cost $3,500, which is a lot of money. And then they were going to make it $5,500 with these additional, like, oh, it's all good, we'll just fix it for you for lots of money. That I was like, screw this, contact the credit card company. This is, like fraudulent, like extortionate behavior, if anything. And so was in this process right now of trying to claw back that from this corrupt company that had booked the flights. A middleman, essentially, which I should have known that was a horrible mistake to make. And then I finally got my finances together again. Still waiting. I don't even know if I'll get that money back from the trying to book my flights. But I got my finances in order again, had my money saved up to be able to book my flights. Went to look at that again recently, and where the flights together to Scotland and Canada before were $3,500, Canada is now $4,000 by itself to go back to, and Scotland is $3,500 to go back to. So it's become 4, 5, 6, 7, $7.5K. If I don't get the money back from the original blunder, it'll be about $11,000 for me to go to a wedding and visit my family, which I haven't seen in 5 years. And so this was starting to feel irresponsible. There's a couple things there. I think the gas prices, which I've not really cared about or been privy to because I don't have a vehicle anymore, so I don't really care, and I take trains everywhere. Suddenly, I was like, oh, I see how the gas prices have impacted me. Jet fuel, that's a gas. That is a fuel, isn't it? That's why everything is so insanely expensive. Sprinkle in a little dusting of a war in the direction of going over to Scotland and how then circumlocucious you need to be to get there. And it was way, way too expensive, which has meant that I will continue my Odyssey as Odysseus and not be able to return for a 6th year to visit my family, which this I feel like it's now do or die within next summer that I got to go back and see everyone because all my family, they have children and I haven't seen them for 5 years. And these are kids who were like 5 when I saw them that are now 10. Like they're becoming full-on adults as I am absent from their upbringing, which really, really matters to me. I am fascinated by kids. I wouldn't have taught for so many years if I wasn't fascinated by kids and their development, and missing it if I had to talk about a severe regret of something that is a part of living here in Japan. That's number one. I think that's number one, to not be able to see my brothers and their children and my family and my friends that live there. That's the big one. But now, to add that irritating silver lining, what it does mean, though, is that I'm going to be in Japan for this whole summer. So full July and full August, I'm going to be here. And that means that there is a lot of opportunity to be creative if I put my head down and I actually focus on getting that kind of thing done. We blasted through this first half, didn't we? All right, let's head into the second. I'm so shocked, actually. This feels good. I was like, did I made a list of things to talk about? But they're really giving me plenty to speak about, which is great. So one of the things, I'm jumping all over my notes here, but this is really cool. So this is something I wanted to talk about. Always these new experiences I'm having here, and a large part, it keeps saying to me how this guy's like so explorative. It's just in his nature, like through everything. It's weird that someone's behavior like that could be expressive in like food, travel, friends, like that kind of, he embodies all of that in everything that he does. And it gets him to these incredible places that a lot of people don't know about in Japan, and doing these really, really cool things. It's wild. Yeah, I'm trying to think how he put it. Oh, yeah, he said, and I've seen this before now, which is great. It's very humble of him. Where he talks about he knows about the great thing, but he cannot do justice in describing it to really convey just how incredible the place is. But then I finally felt like, oh, that does it. If he's like, I can't even tell you how amazing it is. So this thing, it's called Gujo. And so Gujo is this summer festival that takes place over 4 or 5 days, and it's in this town in the mountains. And what occurs is that there's these nights of dancing and celebration, and it's the way in which these dances occur that are very, you might call it's like hypnotic almost. You have these lines through the town and the streets, and everyone will dance in these super long lines, and they do so adjacent to each other and going in opposite directions. And the moves are really, really simple to learn, so you are able to pick up the steps of it quite easily, and everybody invites you to mimic what it is that they're doing. And a lot of people, he was saying there, and so you get caught up in it. There's this energy there that's so cool to connect with. And you wear these geta, and geta are the old school Japanese sandal wear. I think you would call them sandals, wooden sandals that are actually quite thick, and to be completely honest, awkward as hell to walk in, but there's something cool, fun, and traditional about them. And tons of people, there's thousands of people here at this, and they're all dancing in these huge lines, and they're all wearing the geta. And when they make one of the movements is to like stomp in the geta, and he was saying that the combined force of like everybody all moving in unison, that's the word I wanted to use there as well, is really powerful. I don't know if I've said hypnotic, but there's a hypnotic quality to it. And it's near this gorgeous river. The town is filled with all these traditional wooden structures. That was a detail I meant to mention about Hiroshima, as Mihao observed that there were no wooden structures in Hiroshima. Everything was new and brick, and that's interesting to note historically, of course, because everything was wiped out as a result of the bomb. So you've got this like stomping and dancing and drinking and mountainside combined with next to the river culture. Everybody in these, what are they called? Jinbeis, which they're basically a sort of like light summer wear that you would have in Japan, of this kind of lighter, like almost like linen-like material that's like very easy, flowing, breezy kind of outfit to wear while you're doing it all. And where I wasn't going to be able to do that because I was going to be back in Canada, I'm really, really excited here. This sort of irritating silver lining that means I will be here and able to attend that. And you better believe that I'll be there with my camera and we'll be documenting this as one of the, call it like, there's going to be projects that we do with Studio Garden Lab that are obviously they're like for a client, but there'll be a lot of stuff on Studio Garden Lab that is us kind of just showing what we do creatively, going and shining a light on these places that are not so well known, like the Gujo Festival. So that's going to be really, really cool. I couldn't be more excited to be a part of that. Mihao has talked about it constantly. There was a festival that I didn't get to go to recently called Star Festival, which was amazing. There's some like really cool music festivals in Japan, and I haven't been to any music since I've come here, so I'm really, really excited to get involved with this stuff. And any time that we go camping, I've had some incredible camping trips. I'm so excited. Actually, one of the videos not too long ago from last October on my channel is when I went camping in October, and it's amazing. I'm proud of that video. It came out like you really get the vibe of what it was like when we were there having a great time. So check that out on my main channel. And it's clear in the title, I didn't make it confusing. It's like camping next to a Japanese river. I figured the literality of that it's a clear message. That's what you're going to get. All right. Let's move on to other hilarious things that I've written down here, which is sweet. So, the nerd side of me. Oh, actually, let's say we got two like nerd things here. Well, I love talking about books. I've said I think that I don't want to make it too book focused because I find that a bit dry, a bit academic. Which there's lots of great podcasts that do that, but it's not exactly what I want here. I want something that's somewhere between what would be Lex Friedman, which is the more sort of intellectual style, but then mixed in with Two Bears, One Cave, that we can be absolutely ridiculous here, like Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, comedians I both really like, and their podcast is awesome. They get up to such ridiculous stuff. It's my dream to like more have a studio like they have designed eventually, and be a little more consolidated, I guess you would say. But it was nerd stuff. Talking about books, I still want to do it a little bit, and I've talked before, definitely somewhere in these 57 episodes, about Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin is this incredible sci-fi author, now passed. She won like the highest awards for sci-fi. I can't remember what they're called. I know, for example, like Ender's Game won that award. Other books won that award. Can't remember, but she was like the first woman to ever win this award, and it's like the Nebula or something like that. And it was in a time where the world was hilariously against. Well, it never treated science fiction very seriously. Science fiction has always kind of been looked down upon, which is hilarious for me, to the sort of like imagination and like social prescience that you get out of it. Like it predicts a lot of things that you what is the name for? It's like speculative future or something like that that you get from sci-fi, which like tries to consider the way in which technologies will change our interaction socially and things like that. Anyways. So she did that, and it was really amazing. So, like, there was generally pushback even for men who wrote at that time in science fiction because it was considered not real literature. But then the topics, for whatever reason, it was considered like a man's topic to write upon. And so that Ursula be involved with that was looked down upon, and she really had to, like, you shouldn't be doing this, you're a woman. this archaic bullshit. And she was obviously more intelligent than that, and she found an audience. They were like, we don't care that she's a woman. She's writing amazing science fiction. And I can't remember, she's written something like 40 books, and I can't remember the Rokanan's World is the first one in the series. And it's this, she basically created a universe, and it's cool in the way that the way in which she did it was that these stories all exist within the same universe, but they can be like an anthology. They're not directly connected to each other. Kind of like that show Love, Death, and Robots, which I keep talking about, and this year's third season was amazing. They upped the bar again. It's so good. She created the Hamish cycle. Was it? Yeah, I'm getting closer to it. It's like starting to bubble up in my brain here. But everything that I read of hers was incredible. There's the Earthsea Chronicles, which is her fantasy version, and she is amazing. She is equivalent to, in wisdom and quality of prose and quality of writing, to the greats. Like, she's right there with Tolkien. And it was the first time I was like, how have I never encountered this before? She genre blends, and I've read my whole life and never saw this. She does sci-fi that crashes directly into fantasy, or you're like, I'm reading a science fiction book, but this is fantasy, isn't it? But then it all is consistent within the world that you're like, okay, well, I guess it has fantastical elements, but it's still rooted in science fiction. Never seen that before. Super creative. She was not bound by genre, and maybe this makes sense. She wasn't bound by anything. She did whatever the hell she wanted to do and earned massive respect because of it. And all the time, she's like, there's just really, she could see into the heart of humanity and have these moments of conveying human experience or a type of experience so clearly. That's to me like the great value in not in fiction, is where nonfiction is always going to tell you like things that are objectively studyable that we can learn about. But there are truths like, what does it mean to be a good person? What is the cost of peace? What is the thing that is most self-defeating in a human being? These questions that you get perfect answers for from her, where you're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm learning so much about being alive and the history of humankind. So this is this big ramble talking about Ursula, because there was this other book, which is fantasy, called The Name of the Wind. And it's come by my radar a couple times when I was younger. There was a friend who was reading it, and then another time it came up that it was one of these foundationally important fantasy books. And then when I was going in to get my buddy a book for his birthday, which he had celebrated back in June, or this June, I should say, that when I went in, I was going to get him a Terry Pratchett book, which the first one, which is hilarious. I mean, there so many are hilarious. I saw next to that book, it was The Name of the Wind. It's like, oh, well, here it is. It is shown up again. Is this a sign I should finally read this book? And then I flipped it over. And the first person to endorse this author was Ursula K. Le Guin. I was like, if it's good enough for Ursula, it's good enough for me. And she even cites it's the philosophy and wisdom that he has, which is timeless and important and people should read. So I was like, okay, if this woman says that that's one of the strengths that this guy has, I definitely have to check this out now. And what I want to talk about is one specific moment in the book where all the writing has been very beautiful, but I was like, oh, here's the Ursula moment, where this character he's met, and I love this name after just watching the series Arcane. I liked this. There is a man who is basically recounting his whole experience that tells the story of how he became who he is. And he's this very, very like important person in the immediate moment in the book, like the present day. He's like undercover. People don't really know, but he is this insane, legendary guy. And then he's going to tell this story of how he became that to this guy called the Chronicler that like finds out who he is in his town. And he starts from a child, his stories, and he meets this guy who is an arcanist. I was like, sweet, arcane knowledge, an arcanist. I like this. And it's in his lessons, essentially teaching the main character magic, that you get some of this cool wisdom. I find like the best books usually deal with magic in this way. It's more to do with like like understanding the world in a really basic way. It's like it makes it more kind of like science. It's like you're not just imagining something into existence. It's magic is an awareness of the way in which the underlying systems of reality interact with each other. And he has exercises that he does with this arcanist where he's practicing, and there's a whole system to how you are able to manipulate reality. And without going too in depth into that, it was one scene where the arcanist is holding a stone, and he says to him, what do you think is going to happen when I let go of this stone? And the main character, who is a boy at this time, says, well, it's going to drop to the ground. He's like, okay, that's good. It's good that you've accepted that reality, or you're aware of it, because we shouldn't just at a glance think that things are going to be contrary than how they are. Now what I want you to do is to believe, as I drop this rock, believe that it will go up. It will levitate from my hand as opposed to drop to the ground. And he makes the point that so much of reality is the mastery of your belief over it. It's like, that's fucking awesome. it's true. That's why I love it. This is so it adheres, it attaches to the magical system that exists within the book, but for our own personal lives, this is a greater truth as it relates to belief. And I've this is actually echoed by my favorite author. His line in his book, I always say it, it's belief creates truth. And here it is again showing up here, where I feel like a lot of people who have really understood, as I say, that like the underlying systems of reality, this is a fundamental tenet of what people will say. Because it does. If you say, just discuss it really, really practically, if you believe that you can create something cool, that's where it starts from. Now, you're going to have to do real practical stuff to get that all done. You got to watch YouTube tutorials, and you got to get equipment, and you got to do this, that, and the other thing. But it is as a result of belief that you are changing reality. And I like that it's this literal, with the example of the stone, that you can see, oh, that's how sharp it can be, because it can be at complete odds from what we know to be the case about something. So that and that's what you're putting yourself, not always, but in this case, like opposition to. The rock will fall. I have put myself in opposition of my belief that the rock will raise up. And who knows how you might arrive eventually to that, but you got to believe it before it can happen. And I loved that. That was such a great, clear statement of something that doesn't need to exist within this book, but also worked so well in the book for everything else that the character was learning. And I just loved that. It was so cool. And yeah, I'm probably like maybe a fifth of the way through the book at this point, and it's awesome, and I'll continue. I kind of cheated a bit. There was some nonfiction I was reading, but then when I saw this, I was like, screw it. This is going to be like pure pleasure, and I crush through fictional books now. Good times. Talking about other nerdy stuff, so I'm a huge fan. As I grew up, there's this game called StarCraft. There are 3 races. There's the Zerg, which is essentially like a sort of horde, overrun you with cheap units and fairly inexpensive army that you can mass produce. That's what you describe it. Then there's the tenacious and dug-in Terran, which is the adaptable humans. And then there's this high technological race called the Protoss, and they're very kind of Eastern samurai honor culture, cool thing. And I used to play the first one, and then I played the second one a lot, and it's sort of the premier real-time strategy game. Super, super popular in South Korea. They have several news stations, or like sports news stations, dedicated to it at any given time for all the tournaments that occur. Love playing this game, and I recently reinstalled it, and I've been playing that and having so much fun. Last Terra that I went on, I think I went like 8-0. I've been doing good. I have definitely gone on to YouTube and done a little bit of education, a little bit of practice to figure out what it is that I could do to be more effective, having not played in so many years. And it worked. It's amazing. 20 minutes of education and practice makes like just this massive world of difference playing the game. So that was another thing too. If you're some weirdo like me and you actually like playing StarCraft and you want somebody to play with or to do some 1v1s, I'd totally be down. It'd be tons of fun. So contact me and we'll organize a game. That would be really, really cool. We actually, on that same note, we have a friend who's like incredibly good at video games, and so I'm trying to get him into streaming, and I think that would be a ton of fun. We'd get him into streaming. I could edit some of his stuff. We'd get him onto Twitch or whatever. It'd be tons of fun. He's another one of the guys that is a great friend here that we do a ton of projects. Sandro, he's another cinematographer. Really, really, really cool dude. So what else? Okay, talking about, I got written down here, comedy. So it's something I've really enjoyed. It's fun to talk about it here on the podcast. I feel like there's degrees to which people are able to see just who I am when they're listening to this stuff or looking over at my main channel. There's always the question of how much is it Dave and how much is it a persona that is affected by the context in which I'm speaking to you. So I was thinking of the other day where I was trying to define it. Like, what is this like difference? What is this kind of barrier that gets put up between myself and people when they're looking at this stuff? And I was talking to Drew about it, and it kind of clicked as a result of the conversation with him. And that was to say that what it is when I'm usually on videos is that when it's presenting something or going somewhere, I have this feeling of accountability that I'm hyper aware that perhaps more people could be. Whatever I'm putting out here it's the internet. So you should not be so flippant about what you say and do, because obviously this has had massive repercussions for people. And I'm not saying that you should utterly censor yourself. I try and be accountable but true, where I know that I got to be at least conscientious of the fact that you say something stupid or carelessly and you piss a lot of people off and myself off, because I would have not, in the spirit that I want to, share my thoughts to people. But then it can, kind of the downside of that is it creates the persona. It creates the accountable Dave. And so this person that when you listen to it, there is this filter. That's the best way to put it. There's a filter because I want to be not talking out of my ass or saying something that I can't confirmably know to be true. But then it doesn't allow for so much freedom. I'm like, what about this idea? What about that idea? And one place, though, that that could occur is, and I've done it one time on my channel, was with comedy. Because I love stand-up. I love making my friends laugh. And I did one episode on my main channel where I sort of designed it in that way. I wrote down all my jokes, and then I did, I think it was like a bit of 10-minute comedy. And because it was comedy, it meant that there's a sort of imperviousness to doing that, where if you're talking to a camera in a comedic way, it's understood that these are jokes, and to be able to examine things completely and honestly and candidly, that you need to be able to cross every single line, and you need to be able to be shameless about it and recognize that while you make these jokes, they're you like observing something and taking it apart and maybe speaking it, like playing devil's advocate, or like taking all the different like positions that you could, which is like, that's the freedom of comedy. It's like it's to, without any sort of censorship, be able to examine an idea and hopefully make people laugh, because the result of a accurate examination is usually to see what is funny. And I love that. And so I've just noticed since I've come to Kyoto that it's sort of, that has been rekindled in me, where I used to make people laugh when I was younger. It was very, very much like a part of my personality. But because of the accountability that is how I see when I'm making content for YouTube, there was no way that I could really give that to people and still feel accountable, except for this one time that I did that stand-up bit for my channel. And it got like 50,000 views, where I was like, holy shit, this is wonderful. And great response. Really, really cool, from men and women. And it was a story that I told about going dating, and it was cool afterwards. That was sort of the affirmation. I was like, yeah, I think there's people who at the extremes might think that I was being misogynist, but it didn't seem to be taken that way. I said, even beforehand, I like put the disclaimer. I'm like, it's just examining these ideas. Don't, it's comedy. And people did. So that they took it the right way. So that was really, really cool. And whether I can get it together another like solid 5 or 10 minutes or whatever to do that again on my channel, I've been really, really enjoying that being brought out of myself again since I've been here. I've been making my friends laugh and like killing them, slaying them. We've had such unforgettable moments together. Just like at some points, like rolling on the floor laughing. It was me dying too, which was great. I mean, I like to laugh just as much as I'd like to make someone laugh, and so that's been a lot of fun. I hope it continues. There's so many things to focus on. I don't know that I have to prioritize things, or you get that sort of curse of the creative where it's like, I want to do everything, and then you never complete anything because you've got 700 projects on the go that are all exciting, but then you never execute and focus one down. So maybe not in the immediate future, but just as a note, like a reflection on my life here and how it is for me at this time and how I'm enjoying it. It's been so cool to reconnect with, like, oh yeah, I made people laugh, and I really liked that part of my life before I came to Japan. And so to be able to get in touch with it again is like a really, really, really wonderful thing. I mean, I know of few things so wonderful as just laughing with your friends. That's like the best. There's tons of other amazing things in this life, but that's definitely up there as one of the things I enjoy most. So it's been really, really, really cool to get that again, and think about in the not too distant future to, as I say, throw together like a tight 5, a tight 10. It's awesome that YouTube is this medium. I think, like, I don't see this a lot, but like I think it really is. Like, I'm discovering something that's kind of already lifted off, where comedians are using YouTube to get their stand-up out there and to be heard on a platform where all of this touring that they would have to do before, they would still do if you're really, really into it. But you've got this new weapon in your arsenal that's going to be another way to put butts in seats and have people see the comedy that you're creating, which is great. Really, really, really good. Now, I have here PB cups. Peanut butter cups? Okay, maybe this is just a little funny thing. I made a mistake. My buddy had these little Reese's peanut butter cup like candies, and it was so nostalgic for me because I used to love these back in Canada. But there's nothing like that here in Japan. I was like, screw it, I'll order it off of Amazon. That's what I'll do. And then I got a 36 pack. Let me tell you, this is too much peanut butter and chocolate for one man. I chose poorly. I just distributed a bunch to my friends. But my buddy was telling me the other day, he said it was cool. You get these flavors that just take you right back to like whatever point in your life. And he was saying that the Reese's peanut butter cups were doing that for him. So of course, naturally, I was really, really, really stoked about that, to hear that he appreciated the gift and that it was doing that for him. I was thinking about that recently. There was like, I can't remember what it was, some like sight or some smell that brought it back. My friends have been hitting me with a lot of that recently. The just reminding me of things that I had totally forgotten. We were looking at old 90s cartoons, and my buddy was talking about, he was like, oh yeah, Meow again, where he was like, yeah, I really used to like biker mice from Mars. I was like, holy shit, I used to love the biker mice from Mars. Totally forgot about them for the last like 20 years, and then it all came flooding back when he mentioned them. And then we looked at the trailer, I was like, holy shit, like it was kind of like Gargoyles was like so well made in this anomaly. There were a few 90s cartoons that were total anomalies for how they hit this sweet spot of being perfectly entertaining for kids, but also way more intelligent than they had any right to be. Like Gargoyles, totally at the top of all that, but then there was other really good ones like the biker mice from Mars. And also there was this story, there was like this King Arthur one about like this football team that gets put back in time to become the Knights of the Round Table, which was just so cool. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. As I said at the beginning, please do contact me if you want to be a guest, if you want to do the StarCraft matches, if you have any questions. Please do consider supporting me on Patreon if you don't already. Many more episodes to come. I really appreciate you tuning in wherever you have, whether it's on the channel or on Spotify or wherever else you can find this.